Just hours ago, Israeli warplanes bombed Yemen's capital, Sana'a, striking Houthi military facilities, residential areas, and a frontline medical center, leaving dozens dead, more than 100 wounded, and an entire region thrown into panic. And at the very same moment, in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen shocked the world by announcing she would propose sanctions on Israel, including trade measures, a freeze on bilateral cooperation, and a sharp condemnation of the campaign in Gaza. Two events almost simultaneous. One, the sound of bombs tearing the sky over the Middle East. The other, a political thunderclap from the heart of Europe. And the central questions now are whether Israel is opening a new front, and whether the European Union will have the courage to break its long-standing consensus to censure an old ally. And because the answers will shape the months ahead, stay with True Talk until the end of this report so you can see each escalation, each turn, and what may be coming next. On September 10, 2025, Israel conducted large-scale airstrikes against Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen, with primary targets in Sana'a and the province of Al-Jawf, locations believed to house weapons stockpiles, coordination hubs, and logistics nodes for Houthi operations. And according to Reuters, at least 35 people were killed, with more than 130 wounded, including women and children. The strikes came suddenly and in waves without advance warning, with precision-guided munitions used on military sites but collateral damage hitting civilians heavily. And AP reports quoted local health officials saying they had no time to evacuate, and that many were pulled from rubble with signs of asphyxiation and severe burns. One of the facilities destroyed was a frontline clinic receiving patients from Gaza-related clashes earlier in the year. And in a televised address, Houthi political leader Mohammed Ali al-Houthi called the strikes proof that Israel seeks to push the region into a full-scale war, and vowed retaliation. Israel did not merely aim at the Houthis as local actors. Observers argue it sent a message directly to Tehran, because the Houthis have long been Iran's closest proxy on the Arabian Peninsula, receiving funding, training, weapons, and intelligence, and that same network stands behind drone and missile attacks on Israeli shipping, Red Sea ports, and even communities inside Israel. So the question is whether this strike, arriving right after Houthi attacks, amounts to an unofficial declaration of war against Iran, and analysis carried by Al Jazeera argues that Israel believes it must hit the central nodes in Yemen or face continuing attacks on its territory. Yet by striking the Houthis, it inevitably provokes Iran and risks severe consequences. What is your view? Is this a clear signal to Tehran or a limited deterrent strike? Tell us in the comments so we can surface your take in our next update. With more than 130 wounded and dozens killed in minutes, and most of them civilians, AP reported that at least 11 injured were school children near Al-Hazm, where a roof collapsed during a second wave. And the physical wounds come alongside the exhaustion of a population battered by years of civil war. Homes rebuilt have fallen again. Hospital wards that had just regained power now stand understaffed and overwhelmed. And perhaps most damaging is the erosion of trust that the international system will protect ordinary lives. The World Health Organization called for an immediate humanitarian pause, yet no regional power endorsed the appeal. Israel insists all targets were legitimate, and the Houthis promise retaliation at any cost, while thousands of Yemenis are displaced once more, this time not by local clashes between the movement and the government, but by a foreign air force whose campaign is linked to the wider war in Gaza. On the same date in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen took the Parliament rostrum with what many described as the strongest message of her tenure. She announced plans to propose a package of measures against Israel, including a partial suspension of the EU-Israel trade framework, a halt to direct bilateral programs except for civil society and education, targeted sanctions on hardline ministers and violent settler figures, and the creation of a Palestine Reconstruction Donor Group focused on relief for civilians in Gaza. In her address, she stated that manufactured hunger must never be a weapon of war, and that Europe cannot look away from Palestinian deaths while maintaining business as usual. The chamber fell silent, then erupted into debate, inside and beyond the hemicycle. It might seem the entire bloc would line up behind the commission, but reality is more complicated. Hungary immediately objected, arguing the EU must not punish Israel while it is under attack by Hamas. The Czech Republic warned it would veto any measures harming trade or military cooperation. Germany held to silence, neither endorsing nor rejecting the plan. Meanwhile, Ireland, Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands voiced support for a tougher stance. The question now is whether the Union can overcome internal fractures to impose meaningful costs on a long-standing partner, or whether Ursula's words will fade into parliamentary echoes and be buried in closed-door committees. What do you think? Will the EU actually move to sanction Israel? Or will this remain political theater? Share your view so True Talk can reflect the audience pulse in the next segment. Israel's trajectory does not depend solely on its choices. If the EU follows through, and if US support narrows at the margins, while Iran escalates through proxies or direct action, Israel faces pressure across military, diplomatic, and economic fronts. Yet an alternative is possible. Israel could tighten alignment with the United States, cultivate partners in Asia and the Global South that avoid censure, and leverage ties with states like India and Brazil, or selected BRICS members where interests diverge. In parallel, Israel continues to invest in military AI, precision drones, and regional ISR networks, betting that technological edge and strategic partnerships can offset diplomatic headwinds. But as the strikes multiply, civilians in Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria continue to die, and Israel's image shifts in global public opinion from the posture of a besieged nation to that of a state carrying out cross-border operations without international approval, raising questions that will not be settled quickly. Israel is escalating across multiple fronts. The European Union is split between conscience and calculation. The Middle East grows hotter by the day, and the world stands at a crossroads. The last question we leave you with is simple and heavy at once. If this conflict widens, can it still be contained? If this report clarified the stakes and the shifting map, like the video, leave your perspective in the comments, and subscribe to True Talk so you do not miss the next deep dive into a world that is moving faster than headlines can capture.